Hello Dino Peeps! It has been a few days since the Aquatica release and not a lot has moved. ASE is still broken and the only way to proper play is through the beta branch. There's also a lot of confusion on what really went wrong. I see people blaming modders, then I see people blaming Wildcard, even in my comments. So let's have a look into the main issue with Aquatica and why stuff broke the way it did. First of all, new DLCs will always have bugs, especially with a small development team without extensive experience and little to no testing. Aquatica didn't have a dedicated QA team, but the developers themselves tested the game, and I'm not sure how many of them actually played ARK before, but many bugs were not caught. These bugs, on the other hand, do not break the game in a way it is broken right now. Since the whole development environment is a little abstract to explain, I have created a little analogy that may help to show what really went wrong. So let's imagine we have a little cute village named ARK Survival Evolved. It has been around for a few years, and you drive down the main road and you see left and right little houses that represent the mods, and then you see a grocery store, a hospital, and even a cinema. They are enriching the living in the ARK Survival Evolved village, and these places stand for the DLCs in the game. So a while ago, a big metropolis was built not far from the ARK Survival Evolved village. It was promised to be bigger, more modern, more possibilities, and it was also announced that the mayor of the city and everyone in the city leadership would move over to the metropolis. The metropolis was called ARK Survival Ascended. Citizens were invited to move over, and some did move over, but many just couldn't afford living in the metropolis because while the houses were more modern, it was also more expensive to live there, so people decided to stay in the village and just live life as it was before, even knowing that the village won't grow any further. Then after a few years of self-government and peaceful living together, a new building crew showed up and announced that they are going to build an amusement park for the new self-governing and half-abandoned village. People hadn't asked for it, and the opinion was split. Some thought it was great that the village got something the metropolis didn't have, and others questioned the motives of the building crew to build the amusement park right there in the village that was already left behind while the metropolis was still growing quickly. So time passed, and the hill down the long main road was supposed to be the place to build the Aquatica amusement park. The building crew then realized during building the amusement park that it was kinda tough to build a way up the hill so cars could reach the amusement park. The location was perfect, but the infrastructure to get there was a mess. So the building crew, or whoever sent them to the village, asked them to build the main road 5 meters higher. The building crew processed and added a lot of material into the middle of the village. And people who left their houses suddenly saw nothing but a wall of dirt, and far on top, the road to the amusement park. The day the amusement park opens, nobody is able to leave their houses, because even their driveway was just blocked by the raised main road. And even the hospital driveway is completely closed off, making it impossible for people to get or to leave the hospital. The people who managed to get to the amusement park complain that some of the rides are quite dangerous and falling apart. Now the citizens of the village complain, like, hey, we didn't ask for an amusement park, but we especially didn't ask you to completely destroy our village. Like it was working fine the way it did before you changed the road. And now the construction crew looks at the raised road, looks at the houses and the hospital and the grocery store and the cinema, and immediately comes to a solution. They suggest it would be the easiest to raise every single house and the public places by the same amount the street was raised. To the point telling people if they don't do it, they would do it for them. But now the people were upset because their houses were fine. It was the street that wasn't. And for the building crew to touch their houses now to fix them, when it wasn't the houses in the first place which were the problem, that was getting them angry. The problem was them raising the road for the amusement park while ignoring the infrastructure of the village. The village here is of course the game. The houses are the mods and the civilians are the modders and the players. And the main road is the file system of the game. The thing that got changed for Aquatica without taking into consideration that it will break the whole game and every single mod. The decision to change the game's core file paths for a new DLC was a terrible mistake stemming directly from the team's inexperience. For years, modders had built their work on the trust that those file paths were a stable foundation. Changing them showed a failure to understand how the modding community operated and how important their contributions are to the game. A developer's first job is to protect the stability of the game for everyone. And by prioritizing Aquatica, the team overlooked the fact that the game's lasting and true value came from the thousands of mods of the community that they had already built, not just the new DLC that was added. But why would developers make such a game-breaking change? From a fresh developer standpoint, their motivations were probably rooted in standard industry practice. They might have been attempting to optimize the game and their own workflow by restructuring assets and removing what seemed to be redundant data, like for example event assets. It is also possible that they looked at the ARK dev kit's notoriously chaotic folder structure, which is a mess coming from a decade of development by many different people who filled the dev kit with typos and inconsistent names, and then they saw it as their duty to clean it up for a better organization. But what they likely didn't know was that those messy file paths were something the modding community and the clustering of maps depended on. So they treated the dev kit like a private project that they could freely refactor, not aware that they were actually altering a live public-facing system with a 10-year-old grown infrastructure that thousands of mods and 10,000s of players depended on to function. And now the only real path forward is to fix this widespread breakage. And that's on the developers themselves to undo their changes. They must revert every altered file path and rename folder back to its original state and add back every deleted, seemingly redundant file, so effectively lowering the main road back down to its original height. Asking the modding community to fix these themselves is not only unfair, but it's simply not possible, because this demand ignores that the game had already been sunset by Wildcard. A large portion of those experienced modding community has already moved on to other projects. The architects of our houses that are needed for such a massive renovation or almost rebuilding, they are simply not around anymore. And even for those that are still around, and that's a gigantic task that puts a lot of pressure on the few modders that are still around for a problem that was created by good intentions. But more importantly, refactoring mods can lead to even more problems, as many year-old servers really rely on those mods and their stability. So the only responsibility is with the developers of Aquatica to fix the road that they broke, and not on the residents to rebuild their houses to fit the new road. And it's no wonder that the modding community was so upset, because their frustration is not only about the broken game. It is a response to a list of comments that disrespected their work and their whole existence. For months during the development, the modders, a community that is holding a decade's worth of knowledge about the dev kits, its quirks, they were never contacted for assistance and advice, which could have easily prevented this entire disaster. Instead, they were blindsided, first by the game breaking, but then also by the comments implying that they anyway don't have the rights to their creative work and that the studio can take it if they want to. Which is, by the way, something that Wildcard had never done. Quite the opposite, Wildcard granted modders the ability to license out their mods. Something that you can only do when you have the rights to your mod. And this all just got fueled by the announcement that the dev team would fix the mods themselves if modders wouldn't do it, which was seen as a threat by the modding community that overstepped the well-respected boundary between developers and modders. Aside from the technical impossibility from an outside person to do so, because if you do not have the source files, you cannot change the mod, and Steam will not hand over ownership of those user-created content just because one side says so. So technically and legally, really questionable. And the narrative has now, after a few days, changed. After creating their own modder Discord, they finally joined the official modding Discord. Something that was previously heavily rejected with the notions like that the Aquatica Discord is already bigger than the modder Discord, so why should they join it? Again, a complete misconception that 3,000 highly skilled members on a Discord have less value than 11,000 angry players testing the moderation powers of the Discord and posting links to adult sites. We still see the that mods are broken story, which successfully misdirected the blame towards the modders instead of owning up to the things that actually went wrong. This left the modders to face the anger of confused players because they were scapegoated for a crisis they had no involvement in and that they could have helped preventing. Modders were ignored as experts, threatened as creators, and then publicly blamed for a problem they found out about when it was already too late. So it started as a simple but critical technical mistake, but this technical mistake quickly funneled into a much larger community problem because of how they handled the fallout. Instead of admitting that they had broken the game's code, they publicly named the mods as the problem for the breakage. And this disrespect only grew worse when they made threats to take over the mods themselves. They failed to see that the community wasn't just a group of loud players, but also contains a team of dedicated developers who had kept the game alive for years. Because we all know that the replayability of ARK is very much founded in the extensive amount of mods we have. Without the mods, nobody would have played ARK longer than, let's say, 500 hours. So in the end, the broken files can be fixed. But the broken trust within the community is a much deeper wound caused entirely by a simple failure to listen. And while some Aquatica developers and community volunteers have now joined the official modding Discord, that might help to move things faster. And now I also hope that the attitude towards the community changes. Because you can't make game content if you despise the people who were there before you. Because while the community might hate each other, there's only one thing they hate more: if someone is a threat to the community or to the game. We will see if there will be a playable state of the game in the next weeks. So as you can see, it's not really about pointing fingers, but to take accountability of what really went wrong. I'm the first to say don't attack devs for the things they didn't know yet. But what I have a problem with is the tone and attitude towards the community, previous developers who worked on ARK, and especially the big community of modders, who in my eyes get too little recognition for all the work they do in their free time to begin with. I mean, modders don't need to be here, and some modders already announced that if they are treated badly, they would just simply remove their mods from the Steam workshop. And this is usually the last thing a modder would do, so that speaks for the gravity of the events in the last week. It is going to be a hard few weeks for the Aquatica Snail team, and I can imagine they have planned a different outcome and probably also didn't expect the negativity of the community towards Snail's involvement into Survival Evolved. I think many of them, if not all of them, were freshly hired and probably don't know the very burdened story of Snail and the community. But this could be an amazing learning lesson for them, and also the realization that the things Snail wants and the things the community wants are not on different pages on a book, but probably in 2 different books altogether. And if you want the community to be on your side, you have to act for the community, even if that means getting in trouble with Snail. I mean, ask Wildcard about that.